What up, boys? This is Shane Hansen from 7 Day Ban. In this video, I'll be sharing what my guild did to kill Trilliax on Mythic difficulty. However, before I begin, if you'd like to support this channel, hit that subscribe button, and you'll be able to follow along as my guild works through Mythic Nighthold. For this encounter, we chose to go with 2 tanks, 4 healers, 7 melee, and 7 ranged, with an average raid eye level of 899. The majority of our raid had their 4-piece set bonus from Heroic Nighthold, while those who did not have their 4-piece set bonus had at least their 2-piece set bonus. As for weapon traits, only about 5 players had 54 traits, while the rest of the raid had between 40 and 45 traits. The TLDR version of this fight consists of 3 things. First, soaking all food dropped by the boss. This was a top priority for my guild. Second, managing the scrubbers by keeping them alive as well as letting them die at the right time. And third, not dying to the avoidables such as laser beam or players with sterilized debuff or standing in the pools on the ground. Basic mechanics. Now, for the full explanation of this fight, to begin, our guild had to decide on whether to use heroism at the beginning of the fight or to save it for the first ad that spawns later during the encounter. We chose to use heroism on pull because after a few attempts, we realized we could kill the ad in a reasonable amount of time without heroism. For your guild, this will need to be the first major decision you make. Find out what works for you. It's important to remember that heroism is a tool to help you overcome an obstacle. If there is no obstacle to overcome, it's probably best to use it on pull. So in this case, if you can't kill the ad fast enough without heroism, this becomes your first major obstacle. The next thing our guild had to make a decision about was how we wanted to handle the cakes that spawn around the room. Like I said before, managing cakes and feasts is the most important aspect of this fight. In each first phase, a total of 16 cakes will be distributed throughout the room, with 4 feasts being spawned after annihilation, or the laser beam. Regarding the cakes, they need to be soaked immediately, preferably the moment they land. This is because each player will receive a debuff that won't allow that person to soak another food item for a minute. When a player takes too long to soak a cake, they extend their debuff timer, which could prevent that player from soaking a cake or a feast during a crucial moment at a future time. For example, if a player takes 15 seconds to eat cake, that player will now not be able to soak another cake or feast for a minute and 15 seconds. This slight delay will eventually cause the raid to be overrun with cake and feast because debuffs haven't fallen off players yet. Then, when the boss casts Cleansing Rage, where he explodes all the food not soaked, the raid is one shot. To handle the cakes and feasts, my guild initially tried dividing the room into quadrants and assigning specific players to soak cakes in those quadrants. We quickly found that this didn't work because the cakes didn't divide evenly into quadrants consistently. We tried a number of different things before deciding to make a 2-group system. Essentially, the first group soaked the first 8 cakes that spawned, and the second group soaked the next 8. There would be 4 players who didn't receive a debuff after the first phase. We decided that our 2 tanks and our 2 slowest melee wouldn't soak initially. To handle the 4 feasts that spawned after the laser beam, we had one of our slow melee always soak 1 feast while leaving the other 3 feasts for players who got the sterilized debuff. Remember, 4 feasts spawn and 3 sterilized debuffs go out. If a player with sterilized couldn't soak a feast due to still having the stuff debuff, anyone without the debuff would then soak the extra feasts. As for our 2 tanks and last slow melee, they would now need to begin soaking. No matter what, during this encounter, everyone will end up with a stuffed debuff. As counterintuitive as this may sound, a high debuff uptime is more beneficial than a low debuff uptime. Basically, soak cakes and feasts on cooldown and you'll most likely kill this boss. To handle the scrubbers, it's imperative that the players that get the sterilized debuff focus on keeping the scrubbers up. Our priority system at this point was soaking cake or feast, then jumping on scrubbers that were about to explode, then keeping scrubbers alive, and then finally doing damage to the ad or boss. We kept our scrubbers alive for about 30 to 40 seconds. During this time that they were alive, we made sure to have them scrub the floor as much as possible and not eat any cake. We used slows and stuns to stop any scrubber that was about to eat a cake. Just as important as keeping scrubbers alive, though, is letting them die at the right time. We found it best to have all scrubbers die before going into the laser beam phase. This is because if a scrubber consumes an unsoaked cake during the dance, you're probably not going to be able to deactivate the scrubber without taking a laser beam to the face. To ensure that scrubbers died before laser, we let them reach full mana and started deactivating them as they turned into bombs. To do this, we stopped using the sterilize debuff on them once Trilliax threw out his second wave of cakes. As for the adds that spawned during the encounter, we killed the first add quickly by using second potions the moment he was targetable, and making sure that melee were on the same side as the add during the laser beam phase. The first add will throw out additional cake for every 17 seconds that he is alive, which meant that we had about 32 seconds to kill the add before not having enough players to soak the extra cakes. Essentially, if the add didn't die shortly after the laser beam phase, it meant that our guild's DPS was too low, and that the add would be living for too long, which would result in throwing out more cakes than the raid could soak. This means using heroism to kill the first add now becomes a good idea. When the second add spawned, we ignored it in regards to DPS. The only attention given to the second add was making sure he didn't reach full mana by keeping it purged. We kept soaking cakes, managing scrubbers, and burning the boss until he died. Well, that's it for now. If you found this video helpful or useful, give it a like. If you'd like to see more videos like this, be a champion and subscribe. If you have any questions, suggestions, or you just want to let me know how average I am, leave a comment below.